By the time the ropes tightened around my wrists, I understood what they meant by rebirth. It began with a letter, sealed in crimson wax, and marked with the number 33. No return address, no signature. Just the same gold-edged symbol I'd seen glinting on the ring of my mentor, Brother Roth. Inside, the parchment smelled faintly of frankincense and smoke. The message was short. You are ready to ascend. Midnight, the cathedral below. I told myself I'd earned it. Years of obedience, silence, and study. But deep down I knew, promotions in the craft never came freely. They were taken, not given. That night rain hammered the city like static. I arrived at the abandoned cathedral on Fairchild Street, the one fenced off since the fire 10 years ago. A single lantern glowed by the door. Roth waited there, tall and skeletal under his black coat. "You're late," he said, voice calm but heavy. "Are you prepared to surrender yourself tonight?" I nodded, though my throat had gone dry. Inside, the air was thick with candle smoke. The nave had been gutted long ago. Now it opened into a stairwell spiraling down where the altar once stood. We descended in silence. Each step seemed to lead out of time itself. At the bottom lay the lodge beneath, a stone chamber lit by 7 flames and patterned with a vast golden sigil carved into the floor. The geometry pulsed faintly, as if alive. Hooded figures stood around it, hands clasped, their faces half hidden behind veils embroidered with the square and compass. Roth led me to the center. "Kneel," he said. When my knees met the cold stone, the circle closed around me. Someone drew a hood over my head. My world narrowed to darkness and breath. A voice behind me whispered, "What is the first principle of the work?" I hesitated. "Obedience," I said. A hum of approval rippled through the chamber. "Then you will obey," the voice replied. Hands lifted me, turning me until I lost all sense of direction. I felt a cord loop across my chest, tight enough to restrict breathing but not enough to bruise. Every heartbeat became a drum echoing through my ears. They began chanting, not words, but sounds, vibrations that resonated inside my skull. The floor trembled, my instincts screamed to run, but my body refused. The scent of burning resin filled my lungs. It smelled like old wood and fear. Then came the first test of motion. Roth's voice rose above the hum. "Walk forward until your path is blocked." I moved cautiously, blinded, feeling the air shift around me. Something brushed my shoulder, a column maybe, and then a sharp crack split the air. A rod struck my back once, twice, not to injure but to jar. "Trust the path," Roth commanded. I forced myself to keep walking, each step shaking. When I hit a wall, hands caught me, turning me again. The chanting grew faster. The chords tightened. It wasn't a beating, it was choreography. They were breaking rhythm into me, syncing my movements to their will. I lost track of time. The chamber became a loop of sound, touch, and control. I couldn't tell where I ended, and their ritual began. Suddenly the hood was yanked off. Blinding light from dozens of candles flared. I gasped. In front of me stood Roth, his pale eyes glinting like glass. He held a chalice of black stone. "Drink." Inside was something thick and metallic, blood or close to it. My mind revolted, but every gaze in that room pinned me still. To refuse now would mean exile, or worse. I drank. Cold spread through my stomach, blooming into heat. The sigil under me pulsed brighter, and the hum became a roar. My vision blurred at the edges. I could see light bleeding from the carvings, crawling up the walls like veins of molten gold. That's when the action began. The floor shifted, stone plates sliding open to reveal a deeper pit beneath. Chains rattled somewhere below. Wind, or breath, rushed up from the darkness. One of the brothers stepped forward holding a small iron cage. Inside it, something moved, small, frantic, feathered. Roth handed me a dagger. The handle was wrapped in red thread. "Every birth requires a death," he said. The bird screeched as he thrust the cage toward me. My pulse thundered. I could feel all their eyes waiting, measuring, ready to judge. I told myself it was only a symbol, only a ritual. I cut the thread around the cage door. The bird burst out, straight into my face, claws scraping skin. Reflex took over. I swung the dagger. A flash of motion, a streak of warmth, and it was over. Blood dotted the sigil. The chamber fell silent. Roth placed a hand on my shoulder. "Now you've crossed the threshold." But I couldn't hear him over the ringing in my ears. The realization that the ritual wasn't symbolic at all. It demanded instinct, not reason. Violence, not virtue. The hood came down again. I felt them lift me once more, carrying me toward the open pit. The air below smelled of rust and wet stone. A rope slid around my wrists. That's the moment the opening hook came from. They didn't push me. They lowered me slowly into total darkness until the chanting above faded into echo. The stone walls were slick beneath my fingers. I touched something carved there, marks, hundreds of them, like tallies scratched by hands that had come before. I realized then, the ritual wasn't about faith. It was about breaking something essential, something they could rebuild later. When my feet met solid ground again, a door slammed shut above me. The last candlelight vanished. Only my breath remained. When the black water sealed my mouth and the rope bit into my wrists, I counted 17 heartbeats before the world went white. Darkness had weight down there. It wasn't just absence. It pressed against my eyes and filled my lungs, making every breath a conscious act. The air was thick, wet, metallic. Wet. I kept one hand against the wall, tracing the hundreds of tallies carved into the stone, short lines scratched in desperation, the history of others who had stood here before me. A sudden metallic click broke the silence. A small slot opened overhead, letting in a thin blade of lantern light. Something descended on a brass chain, a pendulum, ticking rhythmically, swinging inches from my forehead. A voice echoed through a pipe built into the wall, turning Roth's words into a hollow metallic whisper. "Obedience is breath," he said. "Match your breathing to the time." I inhaled with the tick, exhaled with the next. Simple at first, but soon I realized how wrong it felt, breathing only when commanded. The rhythm grew louder until it replaced my heartbeat. Then, without warning, a rush of cold water pooled around my ankles. It crept upward, inch by inch, until it reached my knees. Roth's voice returned, calm and unhurried. "Maintain the rhythm," he said. "You are learning to keep time while drowning." I tried to fight the rising panic, but the water climbed higher, slapping against my ribs. The rope around my chest tightened as the pressure mounted. A weak yellow light flickered to life, revealing 3 small alcoves carved into the wall ahead. Inside each lay an object, a black iron key, a folded scrap of mirror, and a stub of candle with a flint beside it. Roth's voice drifted through the pipe again. "Choose. Choose wrong and learn." I hesitated, shivering. Fire meant light, and light meant sight, so I chose the candle. It took several strikes of the flint before the wick caught, and when it did, a fragile glow bled into the chamber. The faint light revealed markings on the walls, sigils and letters I'd never seen before, glowing faintly beneath layers of grime. But almost immediately, the flame began to die. The air thinned, consumed by the fire. My lungs screamed. I realized the cruel truth. Light had cost me breath. I extinguished the flame with my palm, burning myself, but the air returned, cold and sharp. The lesson was simple. Curiosity is punished, obedience rewarded. The water had now reached my chest. I turned toward the second alcove and took the mirror. Its surface was cracked, and in the reflection I noticed something strange, faint carvings behind me on the wall, invisible to the naked eye but visible in the fractured light. The letters formed a phrase when aligned just right. "Bend, and the lock will speak. I didn't understand. I reached for the final alcove, the key, and found under the water a small keyhole carved into the wall. I jammed the iron key in, twisting hard. It didn't move. It was a trick, another layer of the ritual designed to confuse and exhaust. The rope around my wrists suddenly lifted, pulling me upward until my shoulders burned. The water reached my chin. "Face down," Roth said softly through the pipe. "Float." I shook my head, but the command came again, slower, colder. "Now." The chain jerked and I plunged forward. The water closed over my face, icy and absolute. I tried to hold my breath, but the seconds dragged. My chest spasmed by the 10th heartbeat, my vision blurred by the 15th. At 17, my body betrayed me. I inhaled water. It filled my throat like glass. Then I was yanked upward. I broke the surface, coughing, gasping, every breath a knife. Above, the pendulum kept ticking as if mocking me. The water began to drain slowly into cracks around the floor, hissing as it disappeared. I hung limp, trembling, until my breathing synced again with the clockwork rhythm. When I finally looked around, I saw a narrow grate near the floor, a sliver of darkness that breathed. A weak voice came from behind it, muffled and trembling. "Please, can you hear me?" Another initiate. "They said if I confess, they'll let me breathe." Before I could respond, Roth's voice filled the pipe again. "Ignore distractions," he said. "There is only the work." Moments later, the door behind me groaned open. Lanterns flared in a corridor beyond. 2 hooded figures entered, faces veiled, each holding something. One had an iron rod, the other a black sack that moved. They unlocked the ring that held me and dragged me forward through the tunnel. The walls dripped, echoing with whispers. I caught glimpses of other grates like the one in my cell, some breathing faintly, others completely silent. We entered a circular chamber lined with 7 mirrors, all tilted toward a stone altar. The hooded figures forced me to my knees. On the altar sat a velvet pouch and a bowl carved from black obsidian. Roth stepped from the shadows, his face finally visible under the light. His eyes were bright but empty like glass. "Every fracture has a shape," he said. "Tonight, we learn yours." He poured the pouch into the bowl, keys, red thread, and a thin bone needle. Then he gestured to the sack. One of the hooded men untied it and dumped its contents onto the altar. A young man rolled out, gagged, bound, shaking with terror. Roth looked at me and said, "2 candidates entered tonight. One will be broken into usefulness, the other into silence." The young man struggled to speak through the gag, but all I could hear were muffled pleas. Roth placed the bone needle in my hand, its tip glinting pale and sharp. "Mark the liar," he said. "One of you has spoken against the lodge. One of you has held faith. Choose with your fracture." The air thickened. From beneath the floor, I heard the slow return of water. The mirrors reflected me from 7 angles, pale, trembling, eyes wide. In each reflection, the boy on the altar looked a little like me, what I was before the ritual began. Roth smiled faintly, as though my hesitation was part of the lesson. "Choose," he whispered, "and be very sure." When I drove the blade into his chest, it wasn't rage that guided my hand. It was relief. The chamber's air grew heavier as the water began to rise again, rippling around the altar's base. My reflection stared back from 7 mirrors, each image fractured by light and flame. In them I saw not 7 versions of myself, but 7 verdicts waiting to be chosen. The young man on the altar trembled, his chest heaving against the ropes, muffled cries leaking through the gag. Roth watched me in silence, the corners of his mouth turned slightly upward, as if this moment had been rehearsed long before my arrival. The bone needle trembled in my hand, my fingers felt numb, my pulse thundered. "Mark the liar," Roth said softly. "One must be broken, so the other may be made whole." I wanted to scream that I wasn't here for this, that whatever lesson they sought was not worth a life. But my voice had long been trained out of me. The hooded brothers stood motionless, veiled and waiting, their torches flickering shadows across the wet stone. The young man's eyes met mine through the blindfold's loose edge. They were wild with terror, but also pleading, as if he knew something I didn't. "Please," he tried to mumble through the gag. The word came out half-drowned. Roth stepped closer and whispered, "The Lodge does not create monsters. It reveals them. The decision you make will show which one you are." The water lapped against my knees. Somewhere beneath the surface, machinery hummed, an ancient pump dragging the tide higher with every breath I wasted. I raised the needle, my hand shaking. The boys' muffled whimpers echoed in the chamber until they became my own heartbeat. Then faintly the voice from the hidden pipe above spoke again, not Roth's voice this time, but another, older one. "Do as commanded," it hissed. "The work must be preserved." The mirrors flickered. For a heartbeat, I saw a different room in their reflections, cleaner, brighter, filled with candles and faces. The same chamber, years ago. Another initiate knelt where I stood. Another trembling candidate lay on the altar. The ritual had been repeated for decades, maybe centuries. I understood then that hesitation wasn't failure, it was the test itself. I pressed the needle forward, stopping just short of the boy's skin, my mind fractured between mercy and obedience. I looked at Roth, hoping to find some flicker of humanity, some signal that this could end another way. He only nodded once, slowly. So I did it. The bone pierced skin like fabric. The boy arched, muffled screams tearing against the gag. A single bead of blood welled up and rolled down his chest, joining the water below. The instant it touched the surface, the chamber erupted in sound, 1,000 whispers overlapping, a language without vowels or mercy. The mirrors blazed white, erasing everything but shape and shadow. Roth raised his hands. "It is done," he said. "He has chosen." But I hadn't chosen him. I realized as the whispers surged that I had chosen myself. To survive, to obey, to stay alive even when it meant surrendering what was left of my soul. The boy on the altar fell still. The hooded brothers stepped forward, cutting his ropes and lowering him into the rising water. I wanted to stop them, but my body wouldn't move. They disappeared beneath the surface, the torches reflecting off the black current like eyes. Then came the action. The moment where obedience met chaos. Without warning, the water surged upward, not from the floor, but from the walls themselves. Hidden seams opened, releasing torrents that slammed into us. The mirrors shattered one by one, their shards slicing through the air. One of the hooded brothers fell, his torch hissing out as it hit the flood. Roth didn't flinch. He simply turned to me and shouted over the roar, "Now you are ready!" The current dragged me toward the altar. I clawed at the stone edge, fingers scraping against carved sigils. Something brushed past my legs under the water. A hand, limp, drifting. Panic clawed through my chest. I forced myself to stand, gasping for air as the level climbed to my ribs. Roth reached for me, gripping my shoulder. "Look at what you've done," he said, voice trembling with conviction. "You have destroyed weakness. You are no longer clay. You are the sculptor." But in that moment, I saw fear in him too. Not of me, but of what the ritual might awaken. The ancient pump groaned. The sigils along the altar began to glow, and the dead boy's blood spread in perfect circles across the water's surface. The glow deepened from gold to red. The entire floor vibrated. I heard the same whispering voices again, no longer from the pipe or the walls. They came from inside me. Each word echoed through my bones. Break, rebuild, ascend. The pain struck like lightning. My hands spasmed, the needle still in my grip. Roth's eyes widened as if he saw something I couldn't. "You weren't supposed to touch the blood," he hissed. "It wasn't meant for you." He stepped back, shouting orders to the others, but the water had already turned opaque, glowing faintly from within. My skin burned wherever it touched. The sigils under the surface flared like molten veins. The mirror's shards floated in the current, spinning slowly around me like orbiting fragments of thought. I felt the rope at my wrists loosen, and without thinking I tore free. The bone needle clattered onto the stone. Roth lunged forward, grabbing my arm. "Do not resist it!" he yelled, his voice cracking. "This is the breaking!" Instinct took over. I drove my elbow into his chest, wrenching free. He stumbled backward, slipping on the flooded floor. One of the shattered mirror shards cut his cheek open as he fell. Blood mixed with the rising red glow, and the air screamed, a sound like metal grinding through flesh. I didn't wait. I turned toward the corridor, half running, half swimming through the rising water. The torches along the walls hissed out one by one as I passed, leaving only the pulsing red glow behind me. The last thing I heard before the chamber door slammed shut was Roth's voice, desperate and broken. "You can't run from what's inside you." When the door sealed, the glow vanished. I collapsed against the tunnel wall, gasping, my body shaking with exhaustion. My hands still stung from the blood's touch. Beneath the noise of dripping water, I could still hear faint whispers, echoing in time with my heartbeat. They weren't outside anymore, they were inside me. When I finally saw the dawn again, I realized it hadn't risen for me. The corridor stretched endlessly in both directions, slick with water and the echo of my own breath. I ran until the lanterns thinned, until the red glow of the ritual chamber became a memory behind me. My legs trembled from exhaustion, but the whispering in my head never slowed. It murmured beneath every thought, speaking in fragments I couldn't understand. Each syllable vibrated through bone, reshaping the rhythm of my heartbeat. I reached a rusted iron door at the corridor's end. The handle was carved with the same sigil that had burned beneath the water, a circle intersected by an inverted triangle. I turned it and stepped into a smaller chamber lit by a single candle. The air was dry, stale, ancient. Dust spiraled in the glow like falling ash. On a pedestal at the center lay a parchment sealed with wax. Beneath it sat a stone basin filled with clear water. I leaned over it, and the flickering candle revealed my reflection. My face was pale, eyes sunken, but worse. Beneath the skin, faint lines pulsed like golden veins. The same sigils I had seen glowing on the ritual floor were etched under my flesh. They moved slightly, like something alive. My stomach turned. I stumbled back, pressing a hand to my face. The whispering surged, clearer now. "You are the vessel." My hand brushed the parchment. The wax seal cracked open easily, as though it had been waiting. Inside was a short inscription written in deep red ink. "The one who survives the breaking shall bear the work. The lodge is now within you." I dropped the letter. The words sank into my mind like roots, twisting around whatever sanity I had left. The candle's flame wavered, stretching into long shapes that reminded me of the hooded figures above. I could still see Rotha's face before the flood, his calm certainty that this was inevitable. Maybe it was. Maybe every initiation ends this way. Behind me, the iron door groaned. I turned, expecting pursuit, but instead there was only stillness. Then a sound, slow footsteps, deliberate, approaching from the dark hall beyond. The air thickened with humidity, carrying the smell of wet stone and smoke. A shadow filled the doorway. Roth stood there, soaked, blood running down his cheek, eyes bright as firelight. His voice was hoarse but steady. "You can't carry it alone," he said. "It will consume you without guidance. Stay back," I warned, though my voice shook. He stepped closer, raising his hands. "The ritual wasn't punishment," he said. "It was passage. We tore away what resisted and left only what could serve. You are part of the structure now, a living cipher." I backed away, my heels striking the basin. The whispering inside my head rose to a crescendo, repeating fragments of Roth's words. Part of the structure. The lines beneath my skin burned, spreading across my arms and neck. The candlelight dimmed, its glow replaced by a low radiance coming from me. Roth's expression shifted from awe to fear. "It's too soon," he said, stepping back. "You weren't meant to awaken." Something cracked behind my eyes, not pain, but pressure, as if another consciousness pressed forward from deep inside. My reflection in the basin shimmered and changed. The lines on my face rearranged themselves into a symbol that wasn't mine. My mouth moved, but the voice that came out was layered, mine and something older. The work is never alone. Roth stumbled backward. Stop, listen to me. You must contain it. If you let it out. But the moment had already turned. The chamber shook, dust raining from the ceiling. The candle extinguished itself in the surge of unseen wind. The whispering burst outward, no longer confined to thought. It became sound, a low, resonant hum that filled the room, vibrating through the stone. The basin's water rippled, then rose upward, forming into spirals that hovered between us. Roth fell to his knees, clutching his head. "You don't understand what they made you." "I do now," I said, though it wasn't entirely me speaking. "You called it breaking, but it was transfer." The spiraling water collapsed, splashing across the floor. The hum faded, leaving only the echo of my own breathing. When I looked again, Roth was gone. Only his ring remained on the ground, the gold dull and cracked. The door he'd come through had sealed itself shut, as if it never existed. I stared at the ring for a long time, then picked it up and slid it onto my finger. The fit was perfect. The whispering softened, as if content. I finally understood what they had meant by rebirth. It wasn't about enlightenment or knowledge. It was about containment, moving the burden of the work from one body to another, keeping it alive through generations. I had become the vessel for whatever power had been entombed beneath that cathedral for centuries. Hours or days passed before I found the staircase leading back to the surface. My body ached. My thoughts were fractured, but the pull upward was instinctive, like a tide. When I emerged, the cathedral above was silent. The city outside was still dark, but faint light crept along the horizon. Dawn. I walked to the doorway and stopped. The sun was rising, but I could feel no warmth from it. The golden light that once belonged to the world now moved beneath my skin. The whispers had grown calm, patient, waiting for something. I realized then that the ritual hadn't ended in that chamber. It had simply changed location, in me. Now every night since, I wake before dawn with the same sound in my ears, the slow, rhythmic tick of the pendulum. It echoes through my skull as if the chamber still exists somewhere behind my eyes. I see flashes when I close them. Roth's reflection, the blood in the water, the boy's face frozen in the mirrors. They are all still there, inside the circle, and I am the circle now. I don't know how long I'll stay myself. Sometimes, when I pass a mirror, the reflection lags a second behind, as if waiting for instructions. The whispers tell me the work continues, that new hands will find the old letters, and when they do, they'll descend as I did. And when the next one reaches the breaking point, they'll hear me speaking through the walls, because that's what the ritual was meant to do. Not destroy, not enlighten, but preserve. To make sure the lodge is never truly gone,